In today's economy, more people than ever are looking to buy and sell businesses. But how do you do it? Welcome to the Deal Board, presented by Transworld Business Advisors. Straight talk about real deals and real people. Listen to stories, interviews, and expert advice to help your business sale, merger, or acquisition process. Now, here are your business exit experts, Andy and Jessica.
Welcome back to the Deal Board, everybody. And today we have an episode for you focused on the advisors you need in your business sale transaction. So we're going to talk about how do you hire the right professional advisors to help you sell your business. And we found there's 3, possibly 4 key people that you need on your team when you're going to sell your business. Andy, what are they?
Yeah, you need a team, right? So first up, you need probably who's been beside you for your whole business career, you need your CPA. So you're going to need someone who understands your books and records and make sure that that they can answer tough questions when it comes time for due diligence. We'll talk more about that. Number 2, you're going to need a deal attorney. Someone has sold businesses in the past, and we'll talk about how to understand which kind of person you need, but it's probably pretty specific of what kind of attorney you need. Number 3, of course, you need a business broker, right? Or an intermediary. And we'll talk about whether or not you need an investment banker or a business broker or what kind of business broker and what questions to ask. And then lastly, you probably need to talk about someone, depending on how much money you're getting from the transaction, of what to do with that money moving forward. So maybe an investment advisor, maybe someone who's been with you before, maybe someone that specializes in tax that you're going to want to talk to.
Yeah, I think those are the 4 key roles. I think the last one too, it gets forgotten a lot. And giving that person that you've worked with your wealth management a heads up is always a good idea because, equally as important as selling your business for a big price is, keeping that money over time. So Andy and I were talking and we've got on the exit factor side, we've got a bit of a hiring guide of how do you hire the best professionals. So Andy and I are going to go through some questions that we think you should ask these professionals when you're thinking about hiring them. We're going to tweak them a little bit for each profession so it gives you an idea. But that first question, Andy, is related to experience. So we recommend asking, how many business transactions have you been involved with in the last year? Right. And I think that last piece, the last year, that recency is pretty key.
Yeah. I mean, especially for some of the, we could go through each one, like CPAs. They want you want them to know the latest tax codes and perhaps ways to deal with the proceeds and what the latest is in some of the taxation on things like goodwill and what you could depreciate and what you can't, and all kinds of things. So I think CPAs, it is important that the CPA had been through that process before. Certainly attorneys. You could talk a little bit about deal attorneys. It is so important that they know what they're doing.
Yeah, so important. And I think I tell people a lot, like, you don't want to have to pay for somebody's education through this process, especially on the legal side. So if you're going with an attorney, like there's an attorney that we refer to in Colorado that does a couple hundred deals a year. I mean, just think about all the different scenarios, all the different problems that attorney has solved. And even beyond that, how many templates of agreements they have, things like that. Not only do you get a better experience, but oftentimes I've seen the bills less too, because they're not writing agreements from scratch. They're not starting from scratch. They have a good baseline. So I think in attorneys too, really, and you mentioned transactional attorney, Andy, at the top of the episode, is you're looking for a specialist in law to go through this transaction. You're not using your general business attorney, your HR attorney, definitely not a litigator, right? You're using an M&A attorney or a transactional attorney.
Yeah. And for the most part, we talk about lower middle market and or small businesses. If you're dealing with a small business attorney, it's probably going to be someone on their own or someone in a small practice. Now, if you're selling a much larger deal, multi-millions of dollars, you may want someone with a firm and that has some experience in that. But as far as costs are concerned, again, their experience in doing this over and over again, they're probably going to have everything that you need to get this done at a reasonable price. So that's what you're looking for. And then jumping into business broker or or an investment banker, a business broker, how many deals are they doing is certainly an important factor. Understanding the nuances of selling deals over and over again is very important. You're going to want someone that has a firm that's done this many times, perhaps even in your industry, right?
Yeah, perhaps even in your industry. I don't know if we've talked about this on an episode before, Andy, but I know you and I have had this conversation is like, what is the best business brokers and the best business brokerage firms, like what is their superpower? And we've talked about that's actually, and I don't think people would think this, it's creativity, right? And that creativity spurs from experience of a firm that's done hundreds, if not thousands of deals. It's the same thing with the attorney. Like they've seen so many situations that there's, I'd say, probably no problem they can't solve, right? Because they have that experience and that creativity to do it. So in this case, I think more is better when you're looking for a professional.
Yeah, and I don't know if we were going to talk about it later, but it's we will talk about specializing in injuries. So I'll save that for later.
Yes.
But as far as a number of transactions concerned for an investment advisor, you do want to work with someone who's dealt with small business owners and how they took that money and maximized it for their, especially if you're of retirement age. A lot of times you're not looking to take that money and risk it. You're looking to create an alternative income that you're going to have, and you'll have the ability to use that money moving into the future and or pass it on to the next generation. So it might be important to not only have an investment advisor, but maybe an estate attorney as well.
Yeah, both really key. So the next question, and we kind of touched on this, but the next question to ask is, what is the average deal size or company size that you work with? And we've talked about it before, but Main Street businesses are typically selling below $1 million, and there's this big middle market between like $1 million and almost $1 billion, right? And then the large market. And I think you want to understand for all advisors, which size businesses do they typically serve, right? CPAs, I think, it's pretty straightforward in terms of tax and accounting, but there's different things that they all have to do with larger size businesses or what type of business it is with the S Corp, C Corp. Find attorneys, this is a big deal, right? Because if you're selling a $500,000 company, you don't necessarily need a law firm that's used to writing contracts for $50 million deals, right?
Yeah, I mean, you should probably ask them what size deals do they usually work on, because what happens is some of these have minimum fees. I know some attorneys and accountants that have like a $50,000 minimum fee if they're going to touch a file. That's if you're buying a business that's worth $250,000, that's probably not going to work for you.
Yeah. And then jumping into business brokers, M&A advisors, investment bankers. I mean, Andy, we probably could do an entire show just breaking down the differences between the three. But really the difference between a business broker, an M&A advisor, and an investment banker come down to one, licensing, which we'll share for another show, but two, deal size. Right. So I think, whoever you're talking to in that seat, just understanding what the range of deal sizes is that they typically work with. We'll say investment bankers typically, it depends on the market, but typically are only working on transactions, I'd say 25 million and up. But again, it depends on the market. Could be much higher. Yeah. 50, so. Yeah. It's 50. It's generally 50 in Denver. And I'm thinking made some major markets, but if you're in a smaller market, you might find an investment banker that takes a smaller deal. But really understanding where do they specialize in that deal size?
Yeah, it's important, and it'll be important on the deal structure. And we don't want to talk about that too much. I always tell my friends, it's like, well, should I use an investment banker? And I have a favorite investment banker I always send people to. And I said, if he won't do your deal, he'll send you back to me. So, and it's, again, it's 50 million. I think they're at 100 million right now. So they really don't want, and they don't have the capacity to do what we do, or they don't have the buyers. They don't have access to the portals. Again, we're talking about, how many deals did you do? Well, if you're doing a lot of deals like Transworld is, we're spending money on those advertising portals that even an investment banker doesn't invest in.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really good question. I think some of these questions get to the heart of good advisors, and buyer access and the type of buyers and type of deals is really key, because obviously you want advisors on your team that one can attract the buyer for your business and then
Right.
make sure that buyer follows through on the transaction, right?
Yeah. So the next question, which is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, is do you specialize in any industry? Now, I think there can be some merits to working with people that specialize in an industry. Certainly on the accounting and attorney side, they might know, there's certainly people that specialize in medical licenses and people that specialize maybe in energy, people that specialize in transportation. I think all those things could help, whether it's a CPA, an attorney, and or a business broker. But I think it's way more important to have specialists that deal with transactions than it is with industry players. And again, like if you ask your heart doctor, have you ever operated on a redhead? I think that's not the right question to ask, right? I mean,
Yep.
it is important that they've done this sort of operation before. And again, business brokers understanding the business transaction, but somebody just came to me and says, "Oh, we have a large grocery business for sale, and we have worked on groceries before." It's like, but how many did you sell in the last year? And it's like, that's probably not an appropriate answer right now.
Yeah.
Question. No?
I tend to agree with you. I agree, like on the licensing side, especially with attorneys, if you're in a highly regulated industry, you probably want an attorney or a team of attorneys, a transactional attorney. And then I've seen this happen too, where you have an attorney on the team that specializes in the license transfer, like definitely. But other than that, I mean, how business transactions are niched is not by industry. Like we just covered it. It's by deal size. It's by sometimes geography. But one of my pet peeves, Andy, is like I'll be talking to someone and they'll say, well, I talked to an M&A advisor that's an industry specialist in e-com, and he told me this is how deals are done in e-com. And that's false. There's no way that this is how deals are done. Like we just talked about, every deal that comes together is unique and is customized and creative. And I find sometimes that if you're looking for a specialist, they're going to be in this thought process or this mindset of this is how it's done. Whereas if you're working with somebody that's got a more diverse background, they might be able to pull something they learned from a transportation deal to apply it to that e-com deal. And overall, it's a better deal for the buyer, the seller, because it wasn't defined by some box or industry standard.
Right. And the good news that Transworld is, with almost 1,000 industry folks here that have been selling businesses, we probably have someone that is specialized, or we can call and pull into a deal. And we've done that before, certainly.
Yeah. So let's jump down a little bit and we're going to talk about costs. So, asking about what the average cost is for a transaction with each of these professionals, and whether most of them are flat fee or upfront or back end fees. I know, Andy, you've got a lot of thoughts about this topic in terms of costs for these advisors.
Yeah. So for small deals, let's talk about small deals, and
Yep.
let's talk about, CPAs and legal. Again, I hate quoting people's fees because they are different, and a lot of times you get what you pay for. But for the most part, if you're dealing with an individual attorney or an individual CPA, they will give you not necessarily a flat fee, but a flat fee with a qualifier. Like they'll say, listen, this should come in at approximately blank, whether it's a couple $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, depending on the size and complexity of your deal. It could be even more. And, and let's talk sub-$1 million deals. Multi-million dollar deals can be much larger in whether it be quality of earnings or just a simple due diligence. Or is it like 300 schedules of legal documents? Or is it, working on a couple of contracts and a non-compete and a, closing statement? But they should give you a range at least.
Yeah. And it should be reasonable. I think the other thing too, and this is tied together with hiring the right business broker or M&A advisor, is part of that caveat on the CPA and especially the legal bill is going to be, it depends on the advisors on the other side, right? So if you have good representation with a business broker or an M&A advisor, they're going to get an understanding of who is the buyer hiring for their attorney. And if you've got sub-$1 million deal, good local law firm, this happened to us, one of our deals years ago, sub-$1 million business, they hired one of our recommendations, good local Denver law firm. The buyer hired the law firm that represents Bain Capital in Boston. Ooh. Yeah. So now we're talking about probably a legal bill at that time should have been $5,000 to $10,000. And we're talking about a $50,000 bill on each side. Right. So I think if you have good representation on the business broker and M&A side, they can really help protect you of, yeah, this might look like a good deal, but it's going to really increase your legal costs. You've seen it too, where a buyer will hire a litigator to represent them. And we know, so it's about having a good understanding going in, but then also making sure you're controlling the dynamics as much as you can on the other side of the transaction.
Yeah. And it could kill your deal. I mean, totally. We were selling an eyeglass store once upon a time, and these buyer hired a trademark attorney. And I can't tell you, I mean, we're talking like hundreds of pages about the name and trademark of the business. And it was completely unnecessary because it was a small little deal. And as I just want to talk about M&A practitioners, lower middle market and or business brokers and upfront fees. Now, there is a time and place for paying for some services upfront. I do believe that it is wise for a seller, if they don't know what they want for their business or can't ascertain what a business may be worth, or everybody's telling them they're out of their minds, they could get a broker opinion of value or a valuation done up front. And that should run a few $1,000s maybe, depending. Again, the first question I always ask them is like, how many corporations do you have? If you have multiple corporations, you have multiple kind of structures or locations, it could get more pricey. But some of these companies that go around that do those high-powered seminars and webinars, and they're charging you tens of thousands of dollars up front, to me is just, it's not worth it to a business owner.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is that when you're searching for the right broker or the M&A advisor, your success needs to be aligned with their success, right? And so the majority of their income should be on the back end of the deal in the form of a commission or a success fee. So they're incentivized to get your business sold. I've seen the same thing, Andy, that some of these, seminar type brokerage firms that are charging, $50K plus for these upfront fees, they're making their money on the upfront fees. So there's little incentive on actually getting the transaction to close. So we won't talk fees and percentages because it's so highly dependent on the deal size and the broker and the timeline, whatever. But I think the key here is with brokers and M&A advisors, it should be back-end focus. Your success and their success are tied together.
Yeah, and you should incentivize them to do well. It's a small fee, you get what you pay for, right? So if something has like a small fee or they're going to charge you a small transaction fee, I'd be wary of that as well, because you're going to get what you pay for. And so be careful. I mean, incentivize, have a good broker. Again, we've talked about how many deals are they doing, what's their track record, and I think that's really important. And the fees should be commensurate with your success, as you said.
Yeah. And so then the last topic to talk to them about is kind of what types of processes and systems do they have in place? And I think this ranges from, if you're looking at CPA and attorneys, this is standard forms. We talked a little bit about this. It helps ease if they have some standard templates for confidentiality agreements, for promissory notes, things like that. But on the broker side and the M&A advisor side is like, do they have a good process to get your business out there, market it, and qualify the buyers to get them the right buyers involved in your deal?
Yeah, they should have samples that you could look at some of their previous deals, maybe some of their sample SIMs, their sample NDA, sample engagement agreement. If these things are having to be written up every single time, they probably don't have a system. They should also have a buyer database. There's a lot of things that, brokers specifically should have, as far as attorneys and accountants should have also. If your attorney or your accountant looks at you and says, "Oh, I would never use a broker's forms," that's a red flag right there. Because most of the attorneys and accountants that we work with that understand that we have certain forms like an NDA, like an engagement agreement, maybe even a form contract that starts the process. If the attorney says you shouldn't use any of those things, that's probably a red flag.
Yeah, it's probably a red flag too, because with the volume, especially that we've done in deals across the country, most attorneys have seen our forms and or written or commented on them, right? So, but I think that the key red flag is it goes back to what I mentioned with the escalating attorney's fees. Now you're paying to write from scratch, and most attorneys bill by the hour. If you figure out, I guess unless you're using ChatGPT, which hopefully no attorneys are doing it, to write a contract, right? To craft a contract from scratch versus starting with a templated form, whether it's from the broker or the attorney has an editing for that deal, significantly less time invested.
Yeah, I agreed. And you should take notes, right? If you're going to meet with a lot of people, maybe have a sheet where you're going to take notes and score them at the end, right?
Yeah, score them at the end. I also too, I think when you find somebody let's say you find an attorney that you really like, and this person is qualified and doing the transactions we talked about, they work in your deal size, you really have formed a good bond with them, ask them for their referrals. This specific deal world and transactions for small business is not that big, right? And it's a little bit, especially in your geographic market, of the players know each other. So if you have an attorney that you start with and scored really high, start asking for referrals for the other seats as well.
Yeah, I would say, some general advice of things I've seen out there. If your financial advisor or your CPA or your legal advisor or your business broker, for the most part, if they're calm and they have good communication skills, that's probably going to be the right person to work with. If immediately out of the box, they haven't even been prompted yet and they're flying off the handle, or they're loud or they're obnoxious, that's probably not someone you're going to want to work with. This is a long process. And there are going to be times where they're going to have to give you bad news, or they're going to have to deliver bad news. And while you want them to be strong, you want them to be sane, right?
Yeah. Really, it's the advisor's job in the transaction, because there's going to be challenges in the transaction. Like we always say, every deal has 9 lives, and things just happen, right? And it's not the job of the seller or the buyer to maintain composure through that. It's helpful, right? If they do.
Yeah, sure.
But that's the advisor's job. The advisor's job is to absorb those challenges, absorb the emotion, and be able to, like you said, Andy, be calm through it, reassure this has happened before, it'll happen again, there's a solution to this problem. Those are the type of people that you want on your team.
Yeah. And a lot of times you want to get people that get along, right? So if your first point of contact is you found a great attorney that deals with a lot of business sales, that might be the person to ask. Who have you worked with on the CPA side, and who have you worked with on the, business brokerage and maybe even investment advisory side?
So I think that's a good way to wrap it up. The professionals you need in your deal: CPA, you need a transactional attorney, a business broker, an M&A advisor, and then a wealth manager. We gave you some tips and tricks to hire them, but overall, find somebody that's experienced, calm, and reliable.
There you go. I think that's great advice. And speaking of great advice and learning more, we have some deals. We have a deal of the week and we have a listing of the week.
Nice. Well, let's jump into it.
Let's do it.
Transworld Business Advisors is the world's largest business brokerage and mergers and acquisitions firm with over 500 brokers in nearly 200 offices worldwide. Transworld's team handles thousands of business sales every year. To be connected with a qualified business broker or learn more about the buying and selling process, visit tworld.com/the deal board or call 888-719-9098.
Hey, Jessica, you know what time it is?
Money time?
Almost. It's time for Listing of the Week.
Welcome back, everybody. We're live for the deal board this week. Our listing of the week is brought to you by Linda Broom, one of our partners at our Dallas Fort Worth Central office. Linda, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. Privileged to be here today.
Awesome. Well, it's always great to have you. You have a new, really interesting and lucrative deal available for people to buy.
I do. I have a insulation business here in the DFW area. They service all the territories of Dallas Fort Worth. And very exciting. Started in 2019, and he's grown it each year, doubled it. And so his numbers have gone from about $300,000. We'll go back to 2021, and then 600,000, and then about closer to $9 million this year.
Wow.
So his numbers are looking really good. STE is probably going to come in around 350.
Wow.
And he's got some great crews in place. So he does both residential and commercial.
Mhm.
Residential is about 65%, commercial is about 40%, something like that.
Good
35,
blend.
40. Yeah.
Good blend.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a really great opportunity. What's the asking price on the business?
Asking price is $950,000.
Okay.
Yep, $950,000, and he's willing to do some seller finance if necessary. So, and great people with great crews in place, which I think is a big plus. He's only spending about 20 to 30 hours max, and that's really doing the kind of the back office things,
Yeah.
the marketing, the accounting, things like that.
It sounds like it's an ideal business for somebody that may be buying their first business or even an add-on acquisition. I don't anticipate it lasting long.
No.
So if someone wants to learn more, how can they reach you?
Please reach out to me at Transworld Business Advisors, Dallas Fort Worth Central. And then my number is 817-755-1026. And that's Linda Boswell, Transworld Business Advisors, Dallas.
All right. And we will drop all that contact information into our show notes. Thank you so much, Linda, for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Have a great day.
Hey, Andy, do you know what time it is? It's time for our deal of the week.
Deal of the Week.
Sold.
Hi, everybody. I'm Charlie Scarlett with Transworld Business Advisors in St. Louis. And I've got a closing last week that I'd like to share with you. It was an interesting deal. This was a historic bed and breakfast located in Hannibal, Missouri. A long history. It was built back in 1871 by a prominent figure in Hannibal at the time, who was also grew up as a personal friend of Mark Twain. And so there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of memorabilia of Mark Twain in the house, including furniture that he'd used when he'd visited and letters signed and things like that from Mark Twain. So a lot of history in this particular closing. We got the listing end of May of 2023. And just closed it last week in the middle of March. This had been a B&B probably for 30 some years. And the seller that I was working with bought it back in 1999. He and his wife bought it, operated it for 25 years. Well, they operated it until she died in 2021. This was really her baby. So her husband moved back to his hometown in Arizona. And they brought in they thought they had sold it to a couple who were going to come in and manage it for a period of time and buy it during that period. Well, it turned out they didn't manage it well, and they ultimately didn't buy it either. And they had real difficulty providing statements, which caused some real challenges for us in trying to get this deal financed. We put it on the market in, I guess, July of 2023. And we got a number of inquiries pretty quickly from people interested in B&Bs. Most of them were underfunded and it just wasn't going anywhere. The seller contacted me in August and said, I got to get out of this. I need out now. We dropped the price from $2.3 million down to $1.2 million. Which was, I thought, exceptionally low because the real estate alone had appraised at $2.4 million back in 2014. But he wanted out. So we got an offer pretty quickly from a very nice couple who lived nearby, and they were going to quit their jobs and run the B&B themselves, which is a perfect situation for this. We went out looking for financing for them and had a number of lenders interested, but because of the lack of financial statements for an 18-month period, it was very, very difficult for them to commit. We all ended up going to the secondary market through an organization called Capital AX. And they were pretty optimistic about it and said they could find a lender. And ultimately, they found a lender in a bank, actually, the Home Loan Investment Bank in Rhode Island. They sent a commitment letter, and we moved forward. We finally got the financial statements and tax returns from the managing company in November. Turned them over to the lenders, and they dug in, and we just moved through the process. There was another hitch in there. They brought in an appraiser to appraise the property. They brought in a B&B appraiser, and they appraised it at about $1.2 million, which was basically the full asking price. It turned out they didn't bother to include the land in this deal, and there were 37 acres that they just ignored. We went back to them. They refused to change their appraisals. So the bank required additional collateral from the borrowers, and ultimately they were able to provide it. So the deal slowly came together. All the paperwork was drawn up, and we ended up closing last week, sold for $1.2 million. Everybody was happy. I was up in nearby Hannibal last week and dropped in and visited the new owners. And they were just happy as clams. They were loving life. Everything was going well. They were up to their neck in alligators, but just loving it. So it was very, very satisfying deal and a very interesting deal. It was great to help those buyers realize their dreams. And my seller is very happy to be done. If anybody has any questions, any other ideas or thoughts, I don't specialize in any particular kind of deals. I've sold everything from medical equipment manufacturing companies to restaurants to home care companies to assisted living facilities, you name it. Anyway, my cell number, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, is 636-400-5409. And my email address is cscarlett, CSCARLETT @tworld.com. I'm Charlie Scarlett, and I look forward to helping in any way I can. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends on social media. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcasting app. If you have questions, would like to appear, or have suggestions for topics for the show, get in contact with us through our website, thedealboardpodcast.com.